This is the first recorded video I could find of me playing guitar, a sloppy rendition of Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones in March 2015. The guitar's been a key part of my life since my 11th birthday when I got my very first one, and as I grew up I started listening to more and more guitar-centric music, especially in metal, with bands like Avenged Sevenfold, Bullet for My Valentine, Iron Maiden, Metallica, Periphery, Bring Me the Horizon, like all kinds of bands from all different sorts of styles. And as I developed my guitar playing, I always wanted to be able to sound like these bands, play their riffs, play their songs, and make riffs that were just as good as them. Through my years of playing the guitar, however, I've always struggled to maintain a consistent practice routine. Often I just pick up the guitar as and when I feel like it, learning bits and pieces of riffs and songs that I like, never putting in any real time or effort in improving the fundamental skills that are required to make guitar playing sound good. I've always simply picked up the guitar, gone to learn a riff, and if it's too hard for me, play it sloppily to the point where you can just about recognise what it is I'm trying to play, and then I think that I'm just not good enough yet to play that riff, but if I just wait a certain period of time, I'll eventually get there and I'll be able to play it better. And so I wouldn't even try and get better, I wouldn't slow it down, I wouldn't do anything, I'd just sit on the knowledge that I couldn't play that, and I'd believe I just don't have the ability yet to play that, there's no point in trying. Hoping that just one day I just magically wake up with the skills required to be able to play it how I wanted it to sound, and I just wake up better at guitar, more able to play these difficult songs. I eventually got to a point, however, when I finally realised that without putting in the work to actively improve upon my guitar playing, I won't get there. To achieve this, I need to create a structured practice routine, focusing on key gaps in my guitar playing ability, whilst learning about the psychological elements such as motivation and self-efficacy, and how I could apply these to my own practice. What is self-efficacy? Self-efficacy is essentially someone's belief that they have in themselves to be able to do something. If a person has a high sense of self-efficacy, they have a strong belief in their abilities to perform. Whereas if a person has a low sense of self-efficacy, that means that they do not believe in themselves to complete certain tasks. Why is this relevant to learning the guitar though? The reason that self-efficacy is so important when undertaking a task such as learning an instrument is because self-efficacy can be a major contributor to a person's motivation. Explained basically, when someone has a low sense of self-efficacy, it's common for that person to have a low feeling of motivation. That is essentially what was happening to me throughout my years of playing the guitar. I was trying to learn songs that were too difficult for me to play, and as a result I was struggling to play them well, which then resulted in me having a low sense of self-efficacy, leading me to believe that I simply could not play these songs, so I was completely demotivated from even attempting to play them. Then as I was feeling more demotivated by playing the guitar, I was playing less, and as I was playing less, when I did play I was getting worse, which then led to further feelings of low self-efficacy and therefore motivation. And so it kept going in a cycle of wanting to be good at guitar and just getting worse and worse, feeling more demotivated every time I tried to play. Eventually I decided I was going to do something to fix this and change this so that I could finally improve on playing the guitar in the way that I'd always wanted to. I wanted to learn how to become better at playing the guitar. A lot of my doubt when it came to learning the guitar came from the idea that some people have innate talent while others do not. I believe that I just was not as naturally talented as some of the guitar players that I looked up to. Innate talent is described as people being born with special capabilities, allowing them to pick up certain skills easier than others. The idea is often debated, however, with little research declaring that innate talent is the most important factor when determining people's skills. The most common theory when determining how someone is so skilled at something is just the idea that they have practiced more. Deliberate practice is said to be the #1 most crucial aspect when determining how someone has become so skilled at something. This was displayed in a study conducted by a group of researchers led by K. Anders Ericsson, in which a group of violinists was surveyed and asked a series of questions to determine how they had reached their respective skill levels. Some of the questions asked were questions such as how long they spent practicing and what other tasks they undertook, being asked to rate them depending on how much it influenced their ability on the violin. All violinists declared practice as the most important factor when improving their skills on the violin, with the more skilled violinists determining that they had practiced for longer than the less skilled ones, which shows a direct correlation between practice and skill level. When determining my practice routine, I wanted to ensure that I was keeping it centered around playing metal music. After all, metal music is what I wanted to be able to play. I wanted to be able to play the riffs and songs from my favourite bands and create my own riffs and songs that sounded like them. This relates back to motivation in terms of intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is motivation that stems from an innate personal desire to increase competence. intrinsic motivation is said to be more beneficial in the long term than extrinsic motivation, which is motivation that comes from external factors. After determining that I wanted my practice to be centered around metal playing, I then decided which specific techniques I wanted to improve in. These were left and right hand synchronization and timing, alternate picking, down picking, and riff writing. All of these techniques are commonplace within metal guitar, and if I wanted to play my favorite riffs and create my own music, then I'd have to be able to improve in these skills. In order to attain noticeable improvement within these areas, I would need to ensure that I was setting consistent short-term goals. Alongside this, I needed to ensure that the goals had a good balance in difficulty, being not too difficult but also not too easy. This is important because goals that are too easy or too difficult often result in lower levels of completion. In order to ensure that my goals were appropriate, I was constantly setting goals based off previous practice sessions. In doing this, I was ensuring that they were challenging enough that they would improve my guitar playing, but easy enough that I would see them as achievable and something that I could attain to. Doing this ensured that my motivation stayed high throughout the entire process. Alongside appropriate goal setting, I also ensured that I maintained high levels of motivation by making the practice enjoyable, focusing many of the practice sessions around songs and riffs that I enjoy. For example, to practice my downpicking technique, I utilised the main riff from Master of Puppets by Metallica, and to practice aspects such as alternate picking and synchronization or timing, I utilised the main riff from the track Marigold by Periphery. With each of these examples, I would set goals at the beginnings of each of my sessions, with aims to regularly increase the tempo that I play the riffs at while maintaining clarity. Throughout this process, I utilised a method of evaluation known as Gibbs' reflective cycle. The reflective cycle was created by Graham Gibbs in his 1988 book, Learning by Doing, A Guide to Teaching and Learning Methods. The reflective cycle consists of 6 key stages, and these are description, so what actually happened, the feelings, so how it made you feel or react, evaluation, what was good and or bad about the experience, analysis, how can you interpret the experience, often utilising external sources to link it to can help, conclusions, what has this taught you and what could you have done differently, and then finally there's the action plan, which is how would you deal with this situation in the future and what changes could you make. A key example of me utilising Gibbs' reflective cycle within my practice routine is when I try to incorporate sweep picking. When I found myself making very little progress, if any, after incorporating sweep picking into my practice routine, I found my self-efficacy and therefore motivation take a decline from wanting to learn the guitar as a whole, and therefore I took it out of my practice routine. After this experience, I utilised Gibbs' reflective cycle to determine if I could have done anything differently or if any changes need to be made when I try to reintroduce sweep picking to my practice routine. This is what that looked like. Firstly, the action. What actually happened? The action in this case was I tried to incorporate sweep picking into my practice routine, but found it very difficult seeing little to no progress. The fact that I was not seeing much progress led to me feeling annoyed and demotivated with not just the sweep picking but playing guitar as a whole, as I realised that I wasn't quite ready yet to explore more advanced techniques. For the evaluation, there were positives and there were negatives to the experience, but I'd say it was mostly a negative experience with positive elements. First, the positives, it helped me sort of ground myself again. I started practicing and I started getting better at guitar, and I started getting sort of a bit too overly confident with my abilities to play guitar, and not being able to do something like sweep picking immediately sort of brought me back down to earth and made me realise that I still had things I needed to work on, such as my synchronization, which is such a big part of a technique like sweep picking. As well as this, it showed me that I really do want to advance at the guitar. I want to learn more advanced techniques, and while I'm not quite there yet, that drive will be really useful as I progress through my guitar playing. Like I said though, this experience was mostly a negative one, with the failure in sweep picking producing negative results in my guitar practice as a whole. Where I was getting frustrated with not being able to sweep pick effectively, I was then getting demotivated and frustrated with playing the guitar, and I was picking up the guitar less and practicing less. For the analysis, I sort of came to the conclusion that me trying to jump in and learn more advanced techniques such as sweep picking aligned with where I started with the guitar, playing riffs that were way too hard for me, that I had not developed the skills required to play, and I think that sort of the feelings that it gave me of low self-efficacy and motivation sort of really mirrored how I was feeling at the start, and so then I dropped it from my practice routine to develop the foundational skills required, such as the left hand synchronization and timing. The conclusion that I got from this experience was that this taught me that I need to be more patient when learning new techniques. I can't run before I walk. And with the sweep picking, when I didn't see any visible results, like almost immediately I started to feel really demotivated, where what I should have done is started to set smaller, more attainable goals and looked for sort of smaller improvements in my playing rather than saying either I can sweep pick or I cannot. And I was trying to learn sort of more advanced 4 and 5 string arpeggios because that's what I see all my favorite guitarists doing, when in reality I should have been starting with the 2 or 3 string arpeggios just to sort of learn the foundations of sweep picking first. So when I go back to learn sweep picking in the future, which I definitely will do as I get more advanced on playing the guitar, I will start far slower than I did this time. I'll use easier sweep patterns to sort of develop smaller short-term goals. As well as this, I'll also potentially look at getting advice from a teacher who can provide me with live feedback on maybe what I need to improve, what I'm doing wrong, what I'm doing right. Overall, the project was a success. Through the utilisation of structured practice, I was able to play some of my favourite songs that seemed previously unattainable with ease. And not only did I become a better guitar player, but I also managed to gain a deeper understanding of what it means to practice. I no longer sit down with a guitar with the aim of playing unachievable riffs, because I've learned that if practiced correctly through the proper process of slowing things down and learning methodically, that nothing is unachievable. Alongside developing my skills of practice and general playability, I also managed to develop my skills with riff writing and music creation, as I gained a deeper understanding of the guitar within the context of a band and how it can work together with drums, bass and electronic elements. I don't sit down with the intention of writing riffs anymore, I sit down with the intention of creating a full piece of music. I went from this idea that I created a little while before this process began, to being competent enough to write all of the music you heard throughout this video. As I move forward through my practicing of the guitar, the things I've learned will remain at the forefront of what I do, ensuring that when I practice, I take the time to properly reflect upon my practice sessions, constantly adapting them and setting constant goals to achieve as I progress, to ensure I keep my self-efficacy and therefore motivation as high as possible to continue my developmental journey on the guitar. Thank you very much for watching.